and we're here.
All right. So the Zoomers, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. All right, so
No, later.
all right, we got a good crowded room, which, you know, sometimes you have a closing, crowded rooms, you get like parents are here involved or excited, or you got an anxious dad looking over the shoulder to make sure everything's done correctly. Probably had a few of those. So
More the merrier.
That's right.
Right.
yeah. Depends on the merrier. But most of the time, in a closing, the lender's involved. So Brian's here as someone for that. So the lender likes to come just to make sure, you know, any questions pop up. Of course, the agents are here to kind of, you know, I say celebrate, because you guys worked hard and there's really not much for you to do but celebrate. So it's great to have you. So
Do you normally go to closings?
I try, but if not, everything that's covered at the closing table, I always cover with the client beforehand. So I always have a conversation, that way you don't feel embarrassed showing up to the closing as an agent and the client has questions about stuff you have no idea about. So they'll go knowing basically everything and they'll just throw their name on the documents as a signature. That's the idea.
Yep, awesome. Yeah,
At
I
least
just want
good
to.
lenders will do that. I can't promise that'll be with everyone, but with me or our team, that will definitely be the case.
And I do think that's pretty unique about them. And I was gonna throw some cover in there just because like my lender does not go to our closings and it causes me zero heartache or anything. So it's not like, oh, if they don't go to your closings, it's a problem. Like, you know, as long as they take good care of your clients, it's all good.
I think that's key is before is having a lender who's they've gone over the loan estimate with the borrower. It's good to go over the CD with the borrower, so then they can kind of confirm and say, hey, this is what we kind of talked about in the beginning. This is where we're sitting at, and this should kind of maybe discuss bottom line. And then always it's important that as agents, your buyers are maybe asking you for, hey, I need a wire. Can I get my wire instructions? That's when you're going to direct them right over to title, right over to me. Then I can get them to them securely. You don't want to have your lender send them because then we don't know if they're secure. We want to make sure that they get them securely. So we have ways to get them over to them in a nice way, or the good old fashioned way. They can come to close and we can hand them the paper copy and go from there.
Yeah.
I was talking to a lender client a couple weeks ago, and it was on a purchase and $30,000 lost because they weren't sent securely, and so the borrower had to get gift funds in order to get the house. They didn't get the money. So hackers are very smart. So always go securely or hard copy. So let's talk a little bit about maybe the buying side. So as far as like title, we kind of jump in to the transaction, maybe more in the middle of the game. The buyer is going to be dealing obviously with you as an agent and dealing with the lender. And so it's always good to have that conversation with your client to say, hey, you know, when the time comes, you're going to be meeting with title, talk to them about the wire situation. I know you guys have an addendum, you have them sign a disclosure regarding wire fraud. So that might be a good time to bring up when the title company will give you the wire instructions and how they'll get them to you. And so we enter that conversation as towards the end as we're kind of maybe getting something scheduled or going over the wire instructions. So as the buyer comes in, we obviously want to make it a great experience. So we have plenty of treats, we have plenty of drinks. As they come into the room, you'll see here, this is something that we do for our agents to where we'll put your picture up, picture of the home. So for a buyer, they kind of get excited because they get to see pictures of the home, and maybe they've only been to the home a couple times, and so this kind of gets them excited. And we talk about some of the features that maybe drew them to the house. If it's the master, if it's not having a yard, anything like that. It just kind of keeps the conversation going and kind of gets them excited. On a sale transaction, we do the same thing, but we just have a picture of the house. They probably don't want to see pictures of their rooms, so we just have a picture of the house. But with this, again, we're really trying to promote you as the agent. So this room is your room to control. if you want, we have agents that want, maybe it's a first home buyer, and so we have Martinelli's and we have flutes. If you want to bring some champagne and stuff, you're more than welcome. We have poppers, we have signs, but really you want to direct this room as the agent. If you want anything added to this screen, as far as maybe a QR code for reviews, a picture of your team, whatever you want, or maybe a thing that says, hey, thank you, I love referrals, and maybe there's a link for referrals. You tell us what you want on that screen, we'll do that. We're happy to kind of include that. Again, really here to promote you and your business. And so also, if you have maybe a situation where maybe they are first home buyers and they're really nervous, that's always good information to get. So then I kind of know how to kind of direct them. If it's their fifth home and they're just ready to sign, then I'm not going to bore them with the details. So that information is kind of nice to have as well, just to kind of know who I'm talking to.
Or we have an attorney coming in that's going to read every single solitary
Or
thing.
or an engineer.
Or an engineer.
Engineers, yes, they like to read everything, which is fine. So here's the case. Those are good heads up as well, because then we can get documents to maybe a day before to review, and that makes this a lot better than someone sitting there reading and all of us just kind of, looking around at each other. So
I've told you, they just wanna know where to sign, and other people, I'm like, if there's a number on the paper, they wanna know what that number.
yeah, so yeah, little heads up on that. It's nice. I had one last Friday where the guy's an auditor, and so he's just used to reviewing everything, but he got the documents the day before, and it was a very, very pleasant closing. It was actually his wife who was asking all the questions. He was like, nope, I looked it over, just go ahead and sign. So it was good.
It also helps on timing for the appointment. Is it gonna be a half hour? Is it gonna be an hour?
That's actually a great thing brought up. So for purchases, I usually go about 30 to 40 minutes. So if your client is asking how long, just so they don't have to take off too much time at work, or if there's travel involved. So yeah, on a purchase, it's usually 30 to 40 minutes. And then the sale is, 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what we talk about, things like that. So just as you're kind of planning that. So yeah, great point. We'll go over all the important stuff. So we'll go over the closing disclosure. And so I have some things I know, there's nothing on this for the Zoomers, but I have some samples. So if you ever want to sit down one-on-one, I can kind of go over things that we talk about, but mainly on the purchase, we just kind of review the closing disclosure. So we hit payments, we hit the loan amount, interest rate, depending on time of year, time of season, we might, hey, that's a great interest rate. Sometimes we just don't say that because of where we're at. But if it is a good interest rate, we'll definitely notice it. And we kind of go over, the key is with payments is you have your principal and interest, and then you have your escrows. And so with first home buyers, I kind of talk about escrows, how they work. We go over their total payment, and the only reason that their total payment would change is if the escrow portion, kind of talk about that. I talk about that Utah's a non-disclosure state, so what they bought the property for is not disclosed to anyone. So if they get anything in the mail, even if it's from the county asking for square footage, purchase price, things like that, just kind of tell them to throw it away. And then also any other junk mail that's might be trying to sell some information. So I kind of just say, hey, if you get anything in the mail that's maybe in the gray area, take a picture and send it to your agent. Just kind of keeps you involved with them. And so they might text you with like a picture of maybe someone trying to get some money for a copy of a document, which we can get them for free.
Yeah, I get pictures from clients all the time.
Yep. So
I tell them to just send me pictures. So
yep. And we also talk about taxes. So we talk about how the preliminary tax notice comes out July, August, and that shows proposed taxes for the year. It's always good to look at that to kind of get an idea of when or if your taxes will increase. So they show a proposed taxes and they show last year's taxes. And the reason why that's important is as the lender does an analysis on the escrow account, then they'll say, hey, we need to bring a little bit more to closing because your taxes went up. That just kind of gives the borrower heads up in July, August. My escrows might change in the first of next year. Also, we kind of talk about taking a look at what the county shows the value at. If they feel that value is higher than what they bought the property for, what they feel it's for, to reach out to you as the agent to kind of get a CMA or get some comparables to kind of not fight, but kind of arbitrate with the county in the first couple weeks of September to kind of get some information. You hot, Nick? It's
Yeah,
a little warm, yeah.
Safe.
So yeah, that's one big thing is like when they get that tax notice, sometimes they kind of don't understand that or panic because they think they got to make a huge tax payment that they thought they didn't or didn't think they had to make, which they do not. The lender's going to kind of pay that for them. But it's also very good information as they look at that to see taxes going to increase or what the values are. That's a good one. And then I just kind of reassure them that that's the only reason their payment from the lender is going to adjust is the escrow portion. And if there's an HOA, we talk about how that's separate, and that'll be dealt with separately in the HOA. We'll reach out to them directly for that as well. So I kind of go over the fees, just again, not in a lot of detail because the lender's gone over that. But I just kind of highlight some of the fees, especially like maybe, for example, not a fee, but a upfront homeowner's insurance for the first year. Just let them know that that's being handled at closing, and then a year or two be paid 1 year from their closing. And then also just remind them that they can always shop around for insurance if they find a better rate, a better deal somewhere else. Go over on page 3 of the closing disclosure, go over kind of the debits and then the credits, just kind of show the earnest money that's been deposited, any seller credits, tax proration credits. A lot of times you'll get a contact in the fall from your client saying, hey, how come I'm paying the full year out of my escrow when I've only owned it for 6 months? So it's kind of go over that, which they may forget that and they probably will, but we do talk about it. And then I go over the bottom line. So go over the bottom line, show them how it is on the closing disclosure, and just remind them if they haven't wired yet that I'll have wire instructions for them. And we talk about the process going to the bank. Their bank's going to ask them if they got the wire instructions from a reliable source. If there's no one out in the car forcing them to wire those funds, we kind of go over that and see if they have any questions about the process. Most banks are pretty easy about wiring. If they're wiring from a brokerage account or some other account, it might take a little bit longer, but I always ask them where they're wiring from just to make sure that it's the same account that they verified with the lender. Sometimes the borrower say they try to wire from somewhere else, which would delay because it's a problem. Yeah. Also, there's a few banks out there that are a little slow on getting wires out. Wells Fargo is one of them. Jordan Federal Credit Union's slow. They like take 24 hours. So I always stress to the borrowers like, hey, just have them get out as soon as possible, just so there's not any more bumps in the road as far as getting things funded. So that's kind of a big thing there. And then the other things we kind of spend some time on is the note, just going over interest rate, loan amount, and when the payments due. So, for example, since we're in March, all payments on mortgages are due in May. Got some time there. So with your standard 15 days, talk about the payment, how it's applied. You're going to get a welcome letter from the lender as far as like how and where to make the payment. We talk about there's no prepayment penalty. Again, this is more for first home buyers, kind of go over that they can make extra payments to principal. If they are going to make extra payments to principal, maybe notify the lender, just kind of give them a heads up so it doesn't apply maybe to the next payment if it's a large principal payment. Am I missing anything, Ryan?
No,
yeah. And that's really the ones that I spend a lot of detail on. I kind of joke with them, the rest is all the boring stuff, which it is, and stuff that they've seen before in a lot of disclosures. So as I go through the closing package, I do just kind of highlight what they're signing, and 99% they're like, oh yeah, I've never seen this before. And so we just kind of, again, get a quick synopsis. So any questions in the room or on Zoom as far as that process and what is said, things I might have missed?
I have a few questions about sellers that I was going to clarify.
Okay, I was going to get to that. But anything on the buyers?
That's just buyers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Anything that agents you guys like to see in your closings on a purchase that we didn't talk about?
I don't think so.
All I would
I
say
think
is an
you've
agent, you
covered.
just have to worry about funding and keys. That's
Yeah.
it. If you're working with a good team. Everything else is taken care of, so
Yep.
just worry about funding and keys, possession.
By the time you get here, it's such a celebration. So, I mean, like closing gifts.
Yeah.
I would say I definitely bring the closing gift to the closing table, just so it's here and they see it when they come in.
Yep, and I really try to highlight that, oh, this is a great gift, just really try to begin to promote you, but that's a good point, like, when after we make copies of the documents, so we have a hard copy like this for the borrower, we also have thumb drives. Everyone has their different preferences, and we can do both. We talk about the process of what's next, you're gonna wire your funds, lender's gonna send the money to me, once I have the okay from the lender, we record. Then once we record, then I let Terry know, and she reaches out to you and gives you the good news. And depending on the deal, most of the time it's upon recording as far as possession goes.
Mhm.
But if it's maybe a few days, we kind of talk about that, and the clock starts right when that recording happens.
I feel like you're really good about going over like utility transfers too. So you usually will remind them again, like
Yep.
either cancel something or don't.
Yep, and I have a form
Yeah,
for
you should.
buyers that has all the numbers per county. And kind of go over that, and so they know when to call and who to call. And sometimes utility companies, if I do bind it like this, I'll make an extra copy of the CD, because some utility companies want a copy of it, so I make an extra copy so they don't have to try to fish it out of here and then try to put it back together, which could be difficult. So,
Yeah.
so,
Can I add my 2 cents?
please do.
So I would just say the 2 big things that I do when I go to a closing is, one, I always have them print out a copy of the CD for me. So I tell them that ahead of time. I just say, hey, I need an extra copy, just because I like to have something in my hands. I like to look busy, you know?
Yeah.
And so you just go and they're like, okay, here's your set, here's buyer's set, you know? And then you may or may not, hopefully you have already reviewed it. If not, I'm just looking at it and I literally grab a pen and I'm just like, okay, I've already looked through it, but I'm just looking busy. So I'm just like, okay, let me make sure this looks good.
Like we actually have a job at closing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yes.
So, okay, all right.
Have you ever found any errors doing that?
Yeah. But more so back in the day. It's a lot cleaner now.
Well, that's a good
But-
point. So what I do is before closing, I will email you as the agent, the settlement statement of the purchase, and on a sale, I'll do the same. Especially on a sale, check commission, things like that. But before you come to closing, you would have reviewed the documents. Unless it's those rare occasions where I'm printing docs out and you're walking in and everyone's walking together, which doesn't happen that much, but it happens periodically. So yeah, definitely. But that's a good point to have the CD, so then you can be involved.
Totally. And if you're with a good lender on a purchase, they're going to go through it the day before. But a lot of lenders, I would say, do not go through that the day before. So make sure if you have a good lender, then they can go through it and they're going to be able to do a better job than we would. If you don't, you may have to do it yourself. If it's some national mortgage lender or something, they may not do the best job, and you have to make sure they know what are they bringing to closing, all that stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about more on the seller side, but really on the seller side, I think it's the realtor's job basically to go through that CD ahead of time to make sure that the seller knows what they're expecting. They're not, coming into a surprise. And specifically, one other thing, when I go to a closing, I always do this. Well, unless they're like if they know what they're doing, I don't do this, but if they're newer, I always say, hey, I want to introduce you really quick. So this is Marcel, he's our escrow officer, and basically what his role is this. Imagine if you're going to sell a car and you're going to sell the car, you got the title in hand and the buyer has, 20 grand or a check for 20 grand, and you want to give them the title, but you don't want to give it to them until they give you the 20 grand. And it's like, at some point someone's got to let go of what they've got. And it could be a little sketchy, right? So basically that's what the title company is. They're going to collect all the funds. They've already got the title. They've got, they can deal with the ownership. As soon as they get all the things that they need, then they're going to make sure it gets distributed correctly. So I always explain it to them that way. And usually they're like, oh, that makes sense. So I do like to set the scene out.
And some agents will send like an email out as far as like, hey, this is what time the closing is, and we've already kind of set up. This is the address. Kind of that introductory email. I have some agents who want me to do that, and I'm completely fine with that. So I'll get email addresses and send it. Hey, excited to meet you tomorrow for the closing. Here's the address, 3:00. These are some items to bring. So on a purchase, most borrowers need to bring 2 forms of ID. That's always the safest. Driver's license. The other form could be something simple: passport, health insurance card, Costco card, debit card. anything with a name on it is usually okay.
And we send out that recap email.
Yeah, and so, yeah, and most lenders don't, and so that's why, like, if, as an agent, if you really want your clients to be, step by step, yeah, if the lender's not gonna send that email out, then, and you don't want to, I'm more than happy to shoot that out. So just gotta let me know. I'm more than happy to be a smooth process in your process. Just if you like, hey, that's one thing off my plate, can you do that? Yeah, happy to. All right, so no questions on Zoom. We'll go over the sell side of things. So much thinner. So with the sell transaction, I usually get involved a little bit sooner in the transaction. I know, Nick, when you do your listing presentations, you kind of have them fill out a form from the title company as far as account information, things like that. So it might be the first time that they're going to realize that there's a title company involved. Most agents don't do that. Most agents, I reach out to them like maybe at listing or most of the time when it goes under contract. And so at that time, when let's say it goes under contract, I ask for the seller contact information. And what I do is I reach out and introduce myself. So it's good that if I request that information, you say, hey, Marcel or someone from his team is going to give you a call. They're going to be asking you for some information. One is going to be your payoff information on your current lender. And so it's always good to have that conversation with them because as I reach out and I'm asking for lender name, lender number, and social, sometimes people kind of panic, which is completely fine. And so I always say, and if I can kind of hear that they're a little hesitant, I said, hey, I know I'm calling you out of the blue. Give Terry a call and just verify that I am who I am, and then I can call you back later. I never want to be pushy, especially with all the fraud going on today. So that's when I introduce myself a little bit sooner. I always try to answer a couple questions with sellers, or at least bring it up. So usually sellers, they want to know when they're going to get money and when. And so I kind of go over, I say, any questions? They say no. I say, well, sometimes sellers have questions as far as their money. And they'll say, at the closing, I'll have a disbursement form for you to fill out. Give me direction on where you want the funds to be wired. And then once once we're recorded, then those funds will hit your account within 24 hours of, in a sense, recording. Just so they kind of have an idea. And then if any questions arise from that, like maybe there's a divorce situation where I got one right now, so they want to talk about proceeds going to be split, or maybe they're purchasing a home and they want those funds to go to for the purchase. We talk about that, and that's never a problem. So, and then if it does go to a separate account, like say for example, maybe they're buying a home out of the state, it's going to go to a title company there. I just reassure them that once I get that information, I'll call that title company directly to verify their account information. So it's not, they can kind of feel more rest assured. So, and then I'm kind of there through the process. Let's say it is a divorce situation. So I'll have that conversation. If it is a divorce situation, I usually talk to both parties just so they all feel involved and one doesn't feel that I'm kind of, leaning more towards the other one. If there's a trust, then one thing I'll ask for is a copy of the trust so I can make sure we have all that paperwork. Because a lot of times the buyer's lender wants a copy of that trust, and most of the time they want it in the 11th hour. So it's good to have that soon. So then when that comes, then I can get it over and it won't delay anything.
Should we risk overheating or? What's our?
I think that'll be for a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Or if the property's in a LLC, then I'll request articles of corporation just to kind of verify who can sign for that company. And then as we are going through that process, say we got a settlement date for, let's say this Wednesday, I will send over an email to you or your transaction coordinator or both. And in my email, I just have a breakdown of the kind of the highlights of the transactions, on the sales price, commission, any transaction fee, home warranty, seller concessions, and I'll put in there the last addendum that I have. So then you and your TC can just take a quick look, run through that, say, okay, that's all right. Oh, missing an addendum. Here's addendum 5. And then you can kind of take a look at the settlement statement and just kind of hit those highlights. So definitely get that to you before closing, because, yeah, you don't want to be here and then things are wrong and never makes, again, we wanted this to be a smooth and exciting transaction. So at closing for the sale, we just mainly hit the settlement statement, which was a one-page document. We do go line by line on this one. So some things I mentioned here, so for example, we call on utilities, water, sewer, garbage. We normally don't call on Rocky Mountain Power or Dominion, because those are attached to the name of the individual, not the property. And we do talk about that at closing. So, for example, if I get a Salt Lake City on this one here, and it's a nice round number, I just kind of state that to the seller and say, hey, you want to call utility companies and give them a forwarding address? Because I doubt that your bill is $155 even. Some companies, or not companies, some cities go a little bit above and beyond what is needed just to protect themselves. And then any overage will go back to the seller, to the address they provide. So we kind of hit that. And there's going to be times, it happens all the time, where I get some utilities and maybe the borrower, or excuse me, the seller just paid that bill the day before. Not a big deal. I know my file. I take it off the settlement statement. We're good. We just kind of come understanding that they made that bill. We talk about taxes. So, for example, right now sellers are going to pay a prorated portion of their 2024 taxes. So we talk about that. And then I remind them they have an escrow account they've been paying into with their lender. And that once that lender's paid off, then that escrow balance, that probably includes insurance, is going to come back to them within 30 days in the form of a check. And then I ask them if they're going to have their mail forwarded from this property to the new property. And depending on their answer, we kind of talk about how they're going to receive their check from the lender. I also talk to them about how they're making their payments, if it's on auto pay or if they initiate the payment every month. If they initiate the payment every month, I just remind them they don't need to make their next month's payment. If they have it on auto pay, I should remind them to cancel it. Most of the time, the lender, when they receive the wire payoff, they cancel future auto pays, but sometimes they don't. And so I'll get a panicked seller saying because they pull their next month's payment out. And so you got a big bank, they got two heads of the monster, they may not communicate to each other. So I just remind them about that. Also, if they have an HOA, I remind them to, if they have that on auto pay, to get that canceled as well. I don't sit there and point out your commission and run the number as far as how much you're paying. I just say, there's your payoff, there's your commission, there's your title, and then per the contract, there's a home warranty of X, and then I go to their bottom line. I kind of hit the key points, but I don't really, they've like Nick said, they may have already seen this, and so I'm not going to run every number and say, well, Nick is getting $21,900.
Sure hope he earns
I
that.
run it a lot of times.
That's it. Yeah. So that's it. Exactly. Get a great deal. But I really focus on the things that really affects their account. So HOA, their mortgage, and then the money that's coming into their account. And then I just, again, remind them, here's the disbursement form, and then we're gonna go with that. And then really not much else left. So we have the deed that they'll sign. I kind of just reassure them, like Nick mentioned earlier about my role as a third party. I say, you'll sign this, I'm gonna hold this in escrow. Once I receive the funds from the buyer side, then I record this, and then I disperse. So I don't turn it over to the buyer side until I have your money in my account. And then we talk about couple of documents that I have, make sure they haven't anything major to the property in the last couple of months. So what a seller could do, they could go out and get another loan. They could maybe have a furnace replaced that hasn't been paid for, water heater. I did have one time a guy, he applied for a home equity line of credit. We pulled the PR, so it didn't show up. He recorded on the HELOC, and then we updated, and then there's a HELOC. So I called the guy and said, hey, did you get a loan? He's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So his proceeds are delayed a couple of days because we had to get the payoff to the HELOC and then disperse. So I just kind of remind them, see if there's anything like that. It comes up periodically, but not that much. And then the last one is disbursement. We do talk about, with your, sellers, I asked them, just in conversation, like, how long have you guys been there? Oh, we've been there 15 years. Because there's a document that we go over for, just shows that they're, it's been their primary residence. So they don't have to pay capital gains. So we kind of talked about that briefly. Yep. So in the conversation, as we're kind of talking, I just, hey, how long have you guys been in the home? And if it's under 2 years, then I know that, we'll kind of have that different conversation, but it's over 2 years, then we just, it goes. So. Anything I left out or any questions from Zoom land?
I had 2 questions. One about divorce. So a seller is getting divorced. Do you have any advice on what we talk to our clients about, like what that sounds like? Because a lot of times they're like, oh, I'm getting divorced. I think we're going to sell the house, but what would your advice be as far as the options?
Great question. So there's going to be a divorce decree that's recorded at the courts. And so we will look at that and that'll tell us, and that trumps any agreement or, like, for example, I've had one spouse say, well, she's never been on title, so she doesn't get anything. I'm like, well, the divorce decree says she gets something. So that trumps whatever you feel is, the right thing. So that's why in the divorce situation, I talk to both parties, just because I can't rely on one person saying this or that. So I go off the divorce decree. Most of the time, it's usually split equity. Some divorce decrees will say split equity after certain debts are paid, or some will even give a percentage of, like, I have one now that's 70-30. And so that's another good reason why I prepare the settlement statement early, so then everyone can review that and get a good feeling. And it's not uncommon for the 2 spouses or ex-spouses to sign at different times, and that's fine as well. So they don't have to sign at the same time, make it comfortable.
Probably better that way.
Yeah. I had one the other day that I had to leave the room as they continued to discuss. So
Oh, wow.
Discuss.
yeah, so
I had one at our old title company and the lady would not come in to sign and she was feeling really sick and she's like, you guys bring me soup and come over, then I'll sign. So we brought her soup and went over to her house. On her to sign.
I had one where the one party didn't want to sign, and so then they filed a court order, and so the one spouse could sign for both because one party didn't want to sign. So
It's a little trickier than soup.
yeah,
Yeah.
figured it's too.
Yeah.
And you might have some messy ones where I have to talk to, again, both attorneys, and I'm fine doing that. Just to, again, make sure we're all on the same page. Maybe you have a divorce situation and there's no divorce decree. That happens, and so again, that's where the communication is key. If everyone is under the same agreement of what's going to happen with the proceeds, and that includes spouses and attorneys, then I'm fine doing it that way. If they're still I don't know what's going to happen, then I can hold the funds until the courts decide what's going to happen. If we've got to get this closed and they don't want to wait, then we can hold the funds. Worst case scenario, I've turned the funds over to the court per direction. And then I've just sent it to the not bankruptcy court, but the divorce court, and then they disperse it once they
If you
figure
don't have
things
a
out.
decree, do you have to get like a whole harmless letter signed by both of them, or?
I just kind of just have that communication, like, hey, you guys have a decree, where are you at? And then if they agree, then we move forward. If they can't agree, then I go to attorneys, and if they can't agree, then I just.
Because either way, they sign a paper that says how it's going to be dispersed.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Even if it's not a divorce.
Yeah, so I just work here and just work my way down until I can kind of get where everyone's on the same page. And I haven't had too many where it was so bad that the closing had to be delayed. I haven't had that because they both want their money.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I've had it where I've had to hold it for a week or so because they're going back and forth. And I've had some divorce decrees where it's not clear at all of who's getting what. So that's kind of pushed back to the attorneys who wrote the divorce decree and had the judge approve it and let them kind of rehash it out and figure that out. So I've had that's a recent one I had.
Sometimes when they're getting ready to get, like sometimes they say we're getting divorced, but they haven't filed, they haven't done anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I know we've said, if you just wanna do it easy, let's just wrap this up, get your money, and then you can let the courts deal with it. But I feel like, cause there's at least a 90-day wait in Utah, right, for divorces, so a lot of times it's like, hey, if you wanna get this done quick, let's run it through and then you can file after that. Does that
Yep.
sound right?
That's right. And if you have a listing and you've heard them say that, reach out to me, let's get a PR, and then I can take a look to see if there is a divorce decree, to see if, that's true. Or again, you might get someone, it's like, nope, I own it, it's all mine. And again, they don't think that the other party has any right to the property, and so, but the law says otherwise. So it's good to kind of get that sooner, so what conversation have, like, hey, I see there's a divorce decree, it's, so and so needs to be involved, or who's on title. That's always a big one too. So
My other question was, should they be paying their last month's payment, or how should they be deciding whether they should pay their last month's?
good question.
We
So
get asked that a lot. Do I have to make my payment?
We legally can't advise on our side, because if they miss it and they get a 30-day late, then we're liable.
Oh, yeah.
So
I think a lot of it depends on when we're gonna record. So let's say, what do we have, the 18th? If we're gonna record, now or later, then I say they should have made their March payment. But let's say we're gonna close April 3rd. I'd say it's up to you, but you're within that 15-day window. But I do talk about, if things get delayed for whatever reason, you might want to make it to avoid your fee. But also keep making your HOA payment too. We had one where they did make their HOA payment, so caused a problem. So yeah, that's a good question. Some people are fine because they don't want to make that $1,500, $2,000 payment. They're fine paying that late fee. But also, when I talk to them, I say, well, understand that if you don't make your March payment, that means your March payment pays February's interest. So that payoff is going to have February's interest and most of March interest. So
money all balances out.
you might be coming out of your account here, but it's going to be deducted from your proceeds here.
Yep.
So.
No free lunch. It's just where you.
So we do talk. I gotta talk about that because they're always I kind of remind them, hey, remember when you bought the house and you closed in March, and you had to make your payment until May. That's why. A lot of times, when it's good to send that settlement statement over for review, because they panic. It's like, wait a minute, I think your payoff's way too high, because they're looking at a principal as of March 1st rather than a payoff as of March 20th.
You guys understand the difference between those? A payoff and a principal balance? So it's a big deal, because when we're quoting net sheets, so when we go to sell their house, we say, okay, how much do you think you owe on it? And they're like, oh, I owe $388. Normally what I'll say is, how much is your payment? And they'll say, oh, it's $2,000. Okay, well, we're gonna add an extra payment on top of that. So we're gonna consider your payoff $390. So it was $388. We're gonna add $2,000 on that for an extra payment, because their payoff will be higher than that amount. But time will also have passed, and they probably will have made another payment. So things will go in your favor, but you have to explain to them those are two different numbers. Because sometimes we are, especially, sometimes we're in challenging times, and it's like that $2,000 might make a big difference.
Yeah.
What they were planning to do with it. They're supposed to be paying off this debt or whatever. So sometimes it matters.
I think you're right. I think when the seller's running the numbers through their head, they forget that the interest or the payoff compared to principal, and they forget about maybe the proration of escrows or other fees that they may not take into account.
When do you guys get the payoff? So like if we take a listing and we send it to you right away and you're ordering title, when do you request the payoff so we know how accurate we are on the numbers?
Well, if you want me to order the payoff at listing, because maybe they said, hey, I'm behind a couple months, or then we'll order it then. But I usually don't order the payoff until it's under contract.
Under contract.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason I do that is because I've done it to where I've ordered it here and updated it here. But lenders will charge a fax fee or some type of processing fee. And if I pull the payoff here and then pull the payoff here, no, but then the seller's like, well, why'd you order it twice? I have to pay this $90 processing fee.
Yeah.
You know, then I have to kind of back up.
Sometimes they can get it on their own with the servicing website.
True.
So
A
that's
payoff.
sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
some servicers will allow them to get it. And then generally it has a per diem in interest accrued. Sometimes.
It does. They all have per diems.
Okay, so
Yep.
they all have per diem, so you can just add, basically, if like you're missing a day, and the payoff's good through, let's say 30 days and you're at 32, you can just add the per diem to the payoff to basically get the new balance.
But sometimes so if I order it, let's say go listing now, but then they made a payment, so they want a more updated payoff because
Right.
they made a payment. So then there's a processing fee. So yeah.
Just might as well ask them if they can get it first.
Yeah.
Generally,
Just be clear about what they're getting. It's not the principal balance.
right, yeah.
Yeah, so again, like say for example, if I made my March payment now. That is paying February's interest. So when that payoff comes, it's gonna show my principal balance as of March 1st, then it's gonna add. Let's say we're gonna fund by the 20th, so on Wednesday, then it's gonna have 20 days of interest. So it's gonna have principal interest, principal amount, plus 20 days interest, plus some of their other fees. Reconveyance fee, some of their other processing fees. So that's the number that's gonna show up on the settlement statement. So it's good to kind of, let them know, hey, it's gonna be a little bit above. That's a question I get all the time. It's like, I think your number's wrong because of this. That's usually the case.
Overestimate.
Yeah, so.
Is there anything you want to speak on as far as probate?
Probate? Yeah, let's talk about probate and there's the other one. Death. Yeah, so I guess, so you got probate. So for example, my wife and I own a piece of property. We're on as joint tenants, meaning that if I pass away, my wife gets the property. And so if that's the case, then we just require a death certificate for the deceased, and then we'll prepare and record a affidavit explaining that I passed away. So now when my wife gets the property and it's her home 100%. So again, if you have a client and there's that scenario, we just need a copy of the death certificate to start things off, but at closing, we will need the original or a original. Sometimes they get like 10 copies. Once we record, then we'll get that death certificate back. We don't need it. So if they're low on copies or whatnot, they will get it back. Let's say that I'm the only one on my property and it's not in a trust and I die. Brian's getting hot. 908. Hot topics here. Let's say that I own the property by myself, I pass away and it's not in a trust, then it will go to probate. So what probate is the estate or the heirs say they have to take things to the court and then say, hey, I'm the heir to Marcel. And so they kind of provide the documents that the attorney sets up and the courts require. And then the judge said, okay, Jake can be the personal representative of Marcel's estate. And that's filed at the courts. And then so now Jake can sign for the estate of me. And then you can determine, and there might be within that probate, there might be a will, and there might be maybe an unfunded trust. And so Jake, as the personal representative, still has to abide by the courts as far as maybe there's a will that says all my money goes to my crazy kids.
In other words,
have to do it.
Marcel in early.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would not want to deal with all that. Just Marcel and.
Sometimes it happens in the middle of a transaction.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you have no choice but to just deal with.
Yeah.
That's recently happened to us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why it's good to get a PR early, because they say, oh, it's in a trust. Has the trust been funded? Meaning, has there been a deed recorded the county, taking it from the individuals to the trust? I had one 2 months ago where there was all this paperwork, the trust was done, the will was done, but they didn't record the deed. And so that same attorney who prepared the trust had to do a probate. And he's like, I guess I didn't make it very clear that they needed to record this, so. Usually the attorney, I think, should record it for them as part of the fee that they're charging. But that's me. So, yeah, so probate is good. It's usually pretty smooth. The only time that a probate costs a lot of money or more money than it does and takes a long time is if there are heirs that are disputing who should be the personal representative or who gets what as far as money goes. Then the time goes, the price goes up. But most of the time, it's pretty good. And then trust, usually, let's say, for example, you have a death with the home's in a trust. If I get a copy of the trust, say maybe from the kids or the successor trustees, that tells me who can sign, then that's who signs, and then I just issue the funds to the trust. And then again, those successor trustees can put the money in the account and distribute it the way that the will or the trust says. Again, most of the time, that's the way it should be, and that's usually the nicest way.
What about power of attorneys? I feel like we recently had one where we thought or we did have a power of attorney, but then when it came to sign, she actually didn't have the right to sign. So are there a few different types of those?
Yep, that's awesome. Yeah, those are good ones too.
Yep.
So let's say you have a trust. Let's say you have a trust or an LLC. And a lot of times they do like a power of attorney for medical or bank accounts or other assets. But if the home is in a trust, the power of attorney cannot be used for the trust. Yeah,
Okay.
so power of attorney can be used for an individual if the individual is still alive. So let's say, for example, someone's in a care facility and it's difficult for them to sign, then that individual can sign using the power of attorney for the alive party. But sometimes I'm more than happy to drive to the care facility if it's here to have them sign. They feel involved, whatnot. But yeah, that's power of attorney is good for that. But again, it can be used for an LLC or if the property is in trust. Yep, good question.
My title knowledge is a little rusty these days. Can you refresh us on tenants in common?
Nice.
Get the sarcasm. No, good question. So
No, it's a real question.
No, we actually asked, I can't remember, we asked each other and we're like,
I wasn't
don't
trying to
know.
out
Do you
these
know?
two, but
I think it was. I don't know.
so tenants in common versus joint
Joint
tenants.
okay, most
And isn't it fun that they all say JT? Does
Yeah.
it say that on yours now too? Like the way we look up the county, it says JT when it's a married couple. And so for a while, because that didn't show up on the MLS, I started thinking, wow, there's a lot of JTs. I think there's a lot of JTs in the world. Like
That's
kind of a
Timberlake.
unique name, yeah.
Yep, no, good question. So the main two that we use in Utah is joint tenants, which is the most common. That can be between husband and wife, wife and wife, business partners, siblings, whatever it is. Joint tenants, meaning that, again, if one party dies in that joint tenancy, then the other party gets the property after recorded affidavit with the death certificate. Tenants in common, let's say that Nick and I buy a rental property, and so we want to be on title, but we want to be as tenants in common. So something happens to me, then my heirs are going to get my 50%, and then Nick will have his 50%. So that's kind of where tenants in common. I had one where just last week, mom and dad and daughter and son-in-law are selling their properties, and they're going to buy a property on their own. And so mom and dad have their property in a trust. They're as individuals. So when they buy, their 50%, so it's going to be treated as tenants in common. Their 50% is going to be in their trust, and the other is going to be in them as a married couple as joint tenancy. So again, a party over here dies, then the surviving spouse gets the remaining 50%, and the trust is still over here. What's interesting on that is the successor trustees of this trust are not the daughter they're going buying the house with. It's a different daughter.
Interesting.
Oh,
So-
that is interesting.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so
Get a little muddy.
well, I guess, or clear it up, right? So if parents die, then this daughter's not gonna get the whole property because, they sold the property here, which should go to the kids. So, yeah. But yeah.
How much is it to add people on outside of closing to title? Isn't it just the $40 recording fee or?
45. Yeah,
45?
I don't charge any dot prep fee. It's just
Okay.
45. So the reason that's 45 is the county charges 40, and then the online recording service charges 5.
Gotcha.
So the 45.
It's a good.
And I think.
No,
Yeah,
go
Brady
for
said
it.
the same thing. I was gonna say.
Probably.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a good reminder too, like who has to be here at closing, who has to be. Because you will have spouses. It happens a lot where the loan is gonna go on one person's name,
Yeah.
but they want the spouse on the title. And that spouse doesn't necessarily have to be here. It's just the person who's signing the loan documents.
Yep.
And you can make it a great experience. I feel like as a realtor, you never want to be the one in the room who's like not on the loan and not included, especially in a married couple. So I personally invite everybody to closing and then they can decide like, oh, do I have to be there? Well, no, but we want you there and we're gonna add you on title or.
But if
something
you
like
feel that like one of the spouse who's not on the loan or on the contract, if they have to like jump through hoops to get there, then it's good to let them know. So if I'm gonna add my wife to title, she doesn't have to sign. She has to sign to come off title. I had one last week where the husband's like, I don't have to be here.
Yeah.
And so.
I think it's
anyway,
good you let them know.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, that's also good because people who are trying to buy in LLCs, they can't, like the contract, if they're financing at least. We won't finance in LLCs.
Yep.
It needs to be backed by the client themselves. So 9 times out of 10, they're gonna just deed it to their LLC right at closing or trust,
Mhm.
whatever it might be. So that's good to know because we'll cover that, so they expect it at closing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so on rental properties, they like to put in LLC
Yeah.
if they have it. So just a quick email like, hey, here's the name of LLC, then I can have that deed prepared. Or hey, so-and-so is gonna come, but their wife's not gonna be there. Can we add, her or
Yeah.
him to title? We can.
Well, that's good to know too, because you can't write the contract in the name of the trust or the LLC, because we'll just bug you and say, okay, we need an addendum now clarifying who the buyer is.
Yeah.
So don't do that. Just put in the buyer's name.
I had the one that where the husband showed up is, I got a copy of the trust, it was husband and wife as success or as trustees of the trust, but everything was under the wife. And so I'm like, well, maybe the husband's dead, but he showed up. I mean, it's good news. It was great. I was excited. So
Alive and well.
so I clarified, I said, hey, everything was written under you as the signer for the trust, which they could, they didn't have to both sign. But I said, do you want to be listed as the other trustee of the trust? He's like, yes. So then I modified the warranty deed for that. So, so yeah, it's, again, communication, just ask a few questions.
And that's 45 per name or per LLC.
Per recording.
Per recording.
Yep.
Cool. I think as far as like scripting too for agents, like Nick said, like what's their job to be here? Especially on the buy side, because I've had horror stories where they think that we're done when you're at settlement. They think that we're completely done. I've had people go out and buy cars. I've had people go out on business trips, and the lender will rerun this or could rerun everything in the next 24 hours. And I've had it where it had to be like reapproved through underwriting, and then it's like another week.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's especially the buyer, I'm just like, okay, this isn't done. This will be done in 24 to 48 hours, but don't go buy furniture. Like I'm very specific because they want to go to RC Willey and, so I'm just like, do not do anything with your credit until we tell you this is recorded and funded.
Or their car broke down. They need to buy a car.
Yes.
And so they will actually think they sign. I've had it where they go, I mean, they've had to buy a car. They didn't want to, they had to, and then that comes.
And it's not random. We have an undisclosed debt monitoring tool that is open until it's funded. So if there's an inquiry, we will know unless it's funded and recorded.
Yeah.
Because that's when the service shuts off. So after disbursement and recording, they're fine.
Yeah, we kind
But
of joke.
clear up until then, something could pop
Oh,
up.
yeah.
And we talk about that, like, hey, after it's recorded, spend away. Why would you?
I mean, if they want to do it in cash, they can, but it's always just safe to tell
Just
them,
don't do
don't buy
anything.
anything. Like you
Yeah.
can wait another 24 hours. It's not gonna kill you.
And that includes new credit cards.
Oh, yeah.
If they're, gonna open a Sky Miles or
Mhm.
going to Home Depot and it gives them a discount, just,
Yep.
And then same thing for, on the cell, I just notify them like, hey, once we're recorded, I'll let Nick know, and then he'll let you guys know, and those funds will be in your account within 24 hours. We'll give them either a copy of this or thumb drive. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Love it. Any questions?
Questions?
Yeah, so I think the key is like, if you have a potential listing coming up, and you get some, as you're talking to your potential seller, you get maybe something that doesn't feel right as far as maybe an ex-spouse or someone's passed away or maybe a power of attorney, things like that. Just ask a few questions, have me take a look at the property. I can take a quick look without pulling a title commitment. You know, on your listing class or, you know, doing a listing, I can take a look to see who needs to sign. I do that all the time. It's not a problem.
Awesome.
Gosh, and the other thing. So as a buyer's agent, especially new one, common question, funding and recording doesn't always take same place as or same day as closing. It just depends on when we close. So if, as a lender, if we close before noon, you're generally okay to fund same day. If not, it pushes to the following morning. Yep. So that's good to know.
And I have it where the lender gets very excited and say, hey, we funded, but they funded their side of things.
But we're not
But
recording.
the wire saw hasn't hit me yet. We haven't recorded yet. So, do you guys send out those emails?
Well, I get them. I don't think we send them.
Okay.
Well, actually, we do.
I think
We
you
say
do.
we fund the client. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
We do
so
say we're funded and we're done. So a lot of clients get confused. I always tell them just wait on a title agent to call and confirm that you're recorded. That's when possession typically takes place with keys and whatnot. So
and I always let the agents give the good news
Yeah.
as far as like, hey,
Yeah.
congratulations, it's done. And then you guys work out keys if it's a purchase, and just kind of finalize some things. So,
Very cool. And I would give a huge shout out to Real Advantage. So they are amazing. Probably 99.9% of all closings are going to happen in a room like this. And they're very accommodating if we need to go to a facility, or I have clients that are like, can we close in Lehigh? And he will go do that. And so
or
they're
at their-
very
at their work.
accommodating.
Yeah, I've closed a lot of variety of spots.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or maybe even your office, you know, because maybe they're just comfortable with going to your space. And that's fine too.
love it. You don't charge any fee. Wow.
Probably
Those
should.
are
I mean, if it's a
Gas,
mobile
yeah.
closing in Tennessee, then we have the mobile notary fee,
Right,
but
okay.
no, I'll get charge any extra fee.
And you, like Keller Williams, you have a lot of options to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can come to Fort Union, go to South Jordan. you
Yep,
can go
we
to
have
Lehigh,
offices
you
in
can-
South Ogden to St. George,
Yeah.
Park City to, I guess, South Jordan. For this west, yeah. Make it be convenient, because again, you've worked so hard, the lenders work so hard to get to this point, and it's like, they can close at 4 o'clock, oh, sorry. Maybe tomorrow. No,
Yeah.
we wanna do it. I have my main assistant, Laurie, she is licensed, so she can close. When I'm out of town, if I'm double booked, we have other escrow officers that can jump in and do it, so
Yeah.
we wanna close it.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay. And then again, celebration. So we have the poppers, we have, you know, the signs that people can hold, so you can post to your social media. We have all that stuff to, you know, and maybe it's a divorce situation you want to celebrate. Whatever it is, we have it for you. So, but some people are really excited. I mean, you know, it's tough to get a loan these days with, you know, the rates and things like that, so it is a celebration.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And if there's anything you guys want included in on your closing that you haven't heard us talk about, we're so open to that. A lot of your clients don't know what title is, and we're kind of an extension of you in a sense. And so if there's something you're wanting to add to the experience, we're super open to that. And
Yeah,
we can
we'll-
make it happen.
We're trying to think of ideas too that grow your business. So we've created some questions that maybe like, hey, can you do a video interview with my client on how the process was? And we
Yeah.
can take them to another room and just ask them a few questions, and then we send that video to you, and you can post it to your social media, or you can use it for your website, or you can use it for improvement, whatever you want. So anything you think that we do, yeah, we're more than happy to do it.
I'm just imagining those crime movies with an interrogation light and everything.
Just like really dark.
Really dark,
Like
a bright
one light,
light,
yeah.
one camera.
What,
You can only see like half their
What are
face.
you?
Yeah.
like, how was your experience in using Jake? You know, what was the best thing that you enjoyed about Jake? You know, again, questions you can. we can
And
ask
they're
as well.
really usually happy at closing, so it is the time to get the
Yes.
review, to get a referral, to get that video, like that's the best time, because
Yep.
they're usually pretty darn happy at closing.
Yep.
Don't wait until the water heater goes out.
No.
No, do them in the height of high,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we know Marcel's quite the dancer, so maybe you could ask for entertainment.
She said we could ask for it.
Yeah, that's right.
I've seen him do.
We
the
have, you
dance.
know, the disco
Yeah.
ball roll come out of the sun.
Chris, I'll do the sprinkler, yep.
That's right, that's right. That's right.
We'll have to get Liz back from all the way to do her mindset. You wanna?
Marcel,
Oh,
oh, you guys link.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, and if there's any questions that come after, you know, yeah, shoot me a text, give me a call.
Yeah.
No problem.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
So good. And fun to be in a different environment.